Hello and welcome to Thank You Thursday. Today we are talking about Samuel Coleridge Taylor, born in 1875, died 1912. Samuel Coleridge Taylor was an English composer born in London in 1875. Samuel lived in Croydon, an outer London suburb in the Victorian age, which was one of London's most impoverished areas. The living standards of people in London in the Victorian age was very poor. Samuel was brought up in a house next to a slaughterhouse and a railroad. His mother was a white English woman named Alice Hare Martin, and his father was a West African physician named Daniel Taylor. Daniel Taylor was forced to leave England in 1974 because England wouldn't allow a black doctor to set up a practice, nor would they hire him. He left unaware that Alice was pregnant with Samuel and played no part in his life. His mother named him after the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Samuel was raised by his mother aged 18 with the help of his grandfather, a farrier named Benjamin Holmans. A farrier is a blacksmith that replaces horseshoes. Alice was the illegitimate child of Benjamin. Benjamin played the violin and would give Benjamin lessons. Eventually he would go on to pay a professional to teach him, a man named Jason Beckwith. Samuel would take part in Jason's recitals and was playing the violin in school at age 10. Samuel had a hard time in school and was named Coley because of the colour of his skin and had his hair set on fire. Samuel left school at age 13. In 1890, at age 15, Samuel studied the violin at the Royal College of Music. After winning a scholarship in 1893, he changed over from the violin to composition, spending 7 years at the college. For an illegitimate child of African descent to be taken seriously and accepted into college in England in that period in time is a remarkable accomplishment. Samuel Coleridge Taylor composed many famous works of art in his time. The most successful piece he created was inspired by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, an American poet and educator who had written the Song of Hiawatha in 1855. This epic poem was about an Ojibwe warrior named Hiawatha and the tragedy of his love for Minnehaha, a Dakota woman. Samuel related to this character, and this inspired him to compose and write his own version of the same name, the Songs of Hiawatha, which are a trilogy of cantatas. A cantata is a vocal composition with an instrumental accompaniment, often done by a choir. The most popular of these songs was called Hiawatha's Wedding Feast, and this is probably the most famous piece of work he did. Samuel completed this at age 22. These musical pieces swept the continent and made him a known name throughout the world. Famous sociologist and civil rights activist Webb Du Bois was a big fan of Samuel's music and presented it publicly on many occasions. When word got back to America, people were impressed of the achievements of a black composer, especially in the African American community. People even formed a society for performing his music and did so at the Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C. This church would be packed and have people standing outside waiting to hear Hiawatha. A lot of Samuel's work was performed in churches across America. It can also be argued that this was an early inspiration of the gospel movement. His music was a sign of hope and pride for communities that were poor and oppressed. In 1904, Samuel was brought over to America to conduct the Marine Band to do a tour of Hiawatha. The band was organized by Thomas Jefferson and was the oldest band in America. It was also called the President's Own. It was the first time a foreigner and someone of African descent was able to conduct the band. This was a historical point in musical history. Samuel's music brought pleasure to those performing and listening to it. This brought a great amount of pride to people of African descent. After his visit to America, Samuel was overwhelmed by his reception, and this inspired him to write 24 Negro spiritual melodies. Negro spiritual melodies are a genre of song that was created by African Americans that imparted Christian values and also described the hardships of slavery. Samuel did this in collaboration with Booker T. Washington, who had written the preface to the collection. One of the spirituals in this collection was called Deep River. Deep River would go on to be transcribed, performed and recorded by the world's first internationally successful violinist, Maud Powell, in 1911. This was the first recorded Negro spiritual. In 1912, Samuel Coleridge Taylor suffered from pneumonia and died. 1912 was the wettest year on record for 200 years. It took him 3.5 days to die from the moment he collapsed at a train station. Samuel died at age 37. It was also said to have been caused by his financial situation. Samuel did not receive any royalties for his most popular pieces of work. In awareness to this situation, people in the British music circles came together and created the British Performing Rights Society, nowadays known as the PRS. The music of choice had changed from classical to jazz music, and Samuel's work and legacy slowly crept into obscurity. After World War II, there wasn't enough choral bands to perform Samuel's music, and eventually he was forgotten. Samuel Coleridge Taylor fought for the understanding between differences in cultures and did so through his music, and had a great impact around the world. I would like to say thank you to Samuel Coleridge Taylor. You definitely made the world a better place. Peace.